Hello everyone and welcome back to another book video for this book channel. We are just absolutely being terrible about doing anything other than covering
We won't
Cosmere,
rebrand to a
Brandon
Brandon Sanderson
Sanderson.
ship.
Also, this is my channel, not Mark. You know, he shows up at a lot of these videos now, and so it's slowly becoming his as well. But I'm going to reclaim this channel for myself when I talk about Powder Mage
Is
soon.
this a crossover channel or an individual channel? That'll get to the topic a little bit.
Yes, yes. Well, I
That we're,
guess let's go ahead and introduce the topic. What are we talking about today, Mark? Because this is actually a topic you hit me up and you want to
yeah,
talk about.
I'm deep on the fantasy subreddits, and I've been seeing a discussion brewing on there for a little while now about the Cosmere and Stormlight archive. And with more people finishing Rhythm of War, the conversation has been heating up. And it's about this influence of both the Cosmere and the Stormlight archive together. And I wanted to talk about it because I see a lot of people talking past each other. It feels like because there's two sides to the argument. And the argument is, is the Cosmere ruining the Stormlight archive? Is the bigger picture ruining this individual story? And while there's two sides to this, there's actually three groups of readers that I feel like are not getting acknowledged properly because there's people who are Cosmere aware who probably don't care. There's people who are not Cosmere aware who probably don't care. But then there's this third group, which is the one that's actually on the other side, who's having these issues with the Cosmere's influence. And I'll preface it by saying I actually kind of agree with this third group. I don't fit into it, but when I remove my personal feelings, I really understand where they're coming from.
So we're going to talk about that in this video. A couple quick things. I have not read Rhythm of War, so we won't be diving into those spoilers, or rather, I've not completed it. I'm a ways into it. Mark has, and then we're going to try to avoid other spoilers, but we'll see. I might have to edit this part out.
Yeah, we'll try and keep it spoiler free, but it's tough.
And for those of you that are maybe just watching this video because you like Mark and my stuff, and maybe you've read like one or two of the books, the Cosmere is basically like Brandon Sanderson's equivalent of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is one of the things I want to kind of talk about in this video. But so obviously, almost all of his books, with the exception of a few series, are all kind of interlinked. Characters kind of cross in between them, and some of the stuff that is happening in the different books ladder up to like a broader storyline that's taking place across the whole universe. There might be Marvel spoilers in this because I might allude to some things.
No.
Anyway, so Mark, do you want to actually really quickly? By the way, there's going to be links in the description for all the books we talk about, and you can go check out Audible.
Shameless.
There's a affiliate link there. I gotta justify the time I spent editing this video. Anyway.
Yeah.
Mark, what are kind of the three main camps, or how do these things work down? How do you want to break it out?
Yeah, so the issue, like we said, is the Cosmere ruining the Stormlight archive. The position that one of these groups is taking is kind of that the Easter eggs, which is kind of what they were billed as in a lot of these books, are going from cute crossover references and things to kind of consuming the actual Stormlight archive story and making it actually a Cosmere story, and that at some point it feels like you're just not getting the story if you're not aware of the Cosmere. Now, I will preface this by saying I think a lot of it comes down to how Brandon Sanderson has kind of done his PR marketing for the Cosmere series initially. He said that each of his works are kind of standalone with minor Easter eggs throughout that help paint a bigger picture, and there's this hidden epic behind everything that you don't really need to know what's going on to understand the individual work that you're reading. Now, recently, actually, in live streams, he's begun walking that back a little bit, in particular with the Stormlight Archive, by saying it has had more crossover than he initially planned on it having. But I think the overall point still stands. If you're like me and Travis, I'm deep. I haven't read as much of all of Brandon's stuff, but I'm deep in the wikis and the word of Brandon's, trying to piece together what's going on. If you're deep in the Cosmere, you probably love all the crossover and getting the hints about the bigger picture. If you don't know about the Cosmere, and you don't know what's going on, I think his point's actually correct. You probably can read the Stormlight Archive fine, and there's people on Reddit who take this opinion. They're like, I don't really care about the Cosmere. I don't know what's going on, and the books still work great for me. But I think the problem is, and if I can suggest that Brandon might have a gap in his logic, is that there's this third group of readers that exists, and it's really more of a spectrum when you really break it down. There's this group in the middle where they know about the Cosmere, they're aware of it, they might even know what some of the other stories are about, but they don't actually know what these references are, but they can recognize them, and it makes it a little frustrating to read the books.
So it's an interesting situation. I think my problem is, I think those folks, if they are aware of it, even if they don't know the bigger picture, it's hard for me to feel too much pity for them or relate to their frustration, because it feels like, okay, at this point in time, you've done enough, you've read enough that you know that this is going to be a thing. So it's hard for me to feel like you should be surprised by it. And I'm not saying it's like, okay, well, you have to go read these books. But at a certain point in time, if you're really struggling with it and you want to learn what the other things are, or it's becoming like a distraction, like, why not go read those other books, right? Like, you can get them from the library. It's not like it's some arduous thing. If you like him writing enough to go read Stormlight Archive, it's weird that I think people would not want to go read some of these other things.
I mean, so to take this other position a little bit, like,
Sure.
if it's partially, Brandon talks about promise, progress, payoff. If the promise is initially that, like, you don't really need to know these other things to appreciate the story, but then you start recognizing all these things and realize you're not getting the full picture, it's probably a little frustrating. And it's not what you signed up for in a sense when these promises were made. And maybe it's not a financial burden, but like, maybe you don't have time to go read what will end up being a 34 whatever books epic that is the Cosmere. And you're like, I signed up for the Stormlight Archive. And one Reddit user put it really well. I forget their name, but they were like, Way of Kings was probably 95% about Roshar, and the story was the Rosharan system. And as it's grown, it's gone to be just the Cosmere in a lot of ways. And it's gone from like 95% to 90 in Words of Radiance to 80% maybe in Oathbringer to now, you haven't finished Rhythm of War, but by the end, it's like 70% and probably trending more crossover related as you go.
So the reason I brought up the Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff was because I think it's the easiest comparison. I really like the I'm not like a Avengers or Marvel type guy. It's not like I've got a bunch of tchotchkes or posters or anything like that. But I like and have seen all those movies, and I like the fact that they all kind of link together. I don't even think that the overall story is particularly like the glove and all that stuff is particularly compelling. It's not like, oh, where's the soul? But the fact that it led, the crossovers of the characters, I think, are the things that are most interesting for me. Like Thor Ragnarok, the fact that it has Hulk in it, and Hulk has been kind of missing, and he shows up here, and they have this like buddy movie that adds so much to that world for me. And I guess to your point, maybe watching a 2-hour movie is less of a, hey, you need to go watch this 2-hour movie to understand what's happening in this 2-hour movie. Maybe that's a little bit less of a thing than like, go read this giant epic book to understand what's happening in this giant epic book. But I think it's hard for me to feel like too many people, like, if fans were frustrated because they're like, I wanted to watch the Thor Ragnarok movie, and like, I wanted to see Jeff Goldblum be a weirdo, and instead now I'm also seeing the Hulk here, and I didn't watch any of the Hulk movies. Like, it's hard for me to feel like those types of people would be fair to make those complaints, right?
I mean, it depends on what it's billed as. If it's supposed to be a standalone movie and then like all these other people start showing up and doing things that are influencing the plot and stuff, and it's no longer, as self-contained of a story as you thought, then I could see the frustration. And I think, I think it's fair to say that people's emotions may vary. I don't think everyone is just full on frustrated. Some of it's like, maybe it's FOMO, like you feel like you're not getting the whole story and now you have to go do this stuff, but that, you don't have the time to do it. Maybe it feels like you don't read that much and you don't want to go and read Elantris. Maybe you don't think Elantris is a good book. I know some people think that's his weakest work. Like, yeah. Do you want to go read that? Do you want to read all his stuff when there's tons of other authors that maybe are demanding your time and attention? Maybe you feel like you're getting the kiddie meal, like, you acknowledge that I'm not getting the full picture. You're introducing this character who has done all this other stuff to me, and you give me enough for me to understand what he's going to be doing in this story. But like, Hulk's a cultural icon, which is where I think this breaks down a little bit. Everyone kind of knows who the Hulk is. If you don't kind of know who these characters are and it's just like vague and mysterious,
yeah.
Like, I recognize that this is vague and mysterious. And usually for a non-Cosmere person, you're like, okay, it's just another mystery on top of a book full of mysteries. But for someone else, it's like, wait, is this something I should know or not? And this is actually a point. What's funny about this is I've seen some people be like, shouldn't I know more about this character? Like, am I missing something? And then people who are Cosmere aware go, actually, no, that's a big Cosmere question.
Yeah.
Still. And it's like, wait, so you become in this like weird position of like, I acknowledge that this is something I don't know. Am I supposed to know it or not? And do I need to go on a wiki to learn about this thing? Because it's raising some of these questions potentially in people, but not providing answers.
I to the wiki point, one, I think I I was about to make it's funny because you kind of addressed it. I was about to say like, well, hey, if somebody doesn't want to go read Elantris, there are tons of different resources online to like fill in those gaps. But if you don't know that that's the book that you're supposed to read, then how would you go find and try to figure that out? You have to do all this extra work to unfoil this. So this is where I'm now leading me to, because you've made me consider this, I think, a little bit. And one idea I have is like maybe Brandon Sanderson should. Okay, so one, it seems as though Stormlight is probably going to be the only one that this is really a big issue for, at least for a while, right?
Until like Mistborn era 4, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. And so it seems like this is probably going to be more and more an issue with Stormlight. I don't want Stormlight to get to not have any of these Cosmere moments, because I think it's really rewarding for like the super dedicated, passionate fans. Obviously, I'm a little biased because I'm a super dedicated, passionate fan, but like I think building out this bigger tableau is part of the, like, you talk about the promise of, he said Stormlight wouldn't have this, but he also did kind of say Stormlight would have it, right? By saying you'll see these crossovers. And so to deny that promise for us would also be of a bummer.
Right.
So my thought is, beginning of Stormlight books, just say what, make suggestions on what people could go read. I think it'd be great if he had like official little things on his website that, even if they're marked coded, he's like, go read this. You know, if you're not interested in reading my other work and you want to know everything going into this book, read section 2 chapter 3 or something like that, and it's just a short version recap of Elantris, for instance, and that way you know as a reader, okay, I don't need to, if at the start of Stormlight it's like, by the way, there's some Elantris stuff in here, that would feel like a spoiler to me. But if he makes it vague enough that it's just something on the website that you can go read, I think it's fine.
Right, and because like the thing is, a lot of those books don't actually cross over to the Stormlight Archive. So if it's like you have to get 10% of a book that you care about to understand the Stormlight Archive, then you have to read 100% of a book to find that 10% that then is actually the crossover material. And that's
right.
You know, I just want to read the Stormlight Archive. You know?
Yeah, sometimes it's just a side character or a subplot or something like that, right? So
right, and some of them are pretty big, like, you know, some of Mistborn Era 1 stuff or whatever, you know, not to give too many spoilers. The other thing I've seen that is probably pretty frustrating is if you are a fan of the Stormlight Archive and you are in this kind of semi-aware position, when you go on the Stormlight Archive Reddit and these other subreddits and other communities, they're all the hardcore fans. So if you're like, I love what Kaladin did, and then this guy seems really interesting, I wonder what's going on. Every single person who goes in and asks a naive Cosmere question or something gets bombarded with people who are like, well, let me tell you what actually is going on with this character and the realmatic theory behind it. And if you don't want to hear it here, go read this other book. And it's like, I have to imagine that's the most frustrating experience as a fan when you just want to geek out with people. And it's like, well, here's a lecture series you have to watch to understand what's happening.
I do think it would be really smart for Brandon to recognize this. It's funny, going into this conversation, I had very little pity. I thought it was just a thing, but now I can understand perhaps it is a problem for some people, and having to go dredge through some subreddits or forums to try to figure out, like, maybe you do want to read the books, but you don't know which ones are important to read. Maybe you don't have the time, so you just want synopsis. Maybe you tried to start Elantris, you didn't like it, and so, but you need to know what is in it that is relevant. I do think it would be smart for Brandon to recognize this. And the nice thing is he's the type of author who could solve this problem because he has a big enough team and he has enough resources. He's got a fairly big platforms that he could construct some sort of situation. Now, I can understand. I bet you, I mean, not to put words in his mouth or anything like that, but I could see Brandon being like, oh no, that would be the worst case scenario because now I've got this huge like other auxiliary resource thing. Like, he seems like the type of person that doesn't want fans to have to go do a bunch of research and stuff like that to enjoy his stuff. So maybe that would be his pushback, but it'll probably continue to become an issue more and more over the course of Stormlight, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the general feel I think with some of these people is not that it's completely pushed them out of the series yet, but that it's trending that way. Especially, you know, depending on how much you know too. Like on his website, or maybe it was Tor, I forget which one, but they posted like everything you need to know about the Heralds going into Stormlight Archive or Rhythm of War, and they do have these resources, but like getting that into people's hands, and you know, if you are one of these more, they're probably, you could say, a little bit more of a casual readership that's not following him everywhere, that it's like harder to get that information to them. without them taking some initiative.
I remember he referenced a book, like a reader's guide, that went along with the Wheel of Time series, which I've not read.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I wonder if, and he's mentioned in the past that he's considered doing something like that for Stormlight, potentially after later books have occurred. I think, just to paraphrase a stream that I remember he mentioned this on. I wonder if that couldn't be something that he would do, or could do, and perhaps he could make it available for free on his website, and then also like a published version that people can go spend money for if they want to do that.
Right. There was an app or something that you could like sync with and tell you what chapter you're on. And
oh, really? I didn't realize
that was the Wheel of Time one. From what I understand, I haven't used it. It was very in depth and awesome. And I feel like we both watch enough of Brandon's content. Like I watch literally everything he puts out on his YouTube channel that I feel somewhat secure saying that like this might actually be a blind spot, this third group, because I haven't really seen him acknowledge it yet in any way. And putting in his acknowledgments of the book, because he has like at the
he has a preface essentially.
Yeah, he has all these prefaces and acknowledgments and stuff, being like, hey, if you're like, here's a resource that can help you if you're in this group or something. Like I think it could actually help a lot of these people being like, go to this website and download this thing.
Or even, by the way, like I have read Elantris. I don't know if I want to read it again anytime soon, not because it was like so bad or anything like that, but just like it was a bit more of a slog for me than like Mistborn or something. And so whenever 5 years from now have passed, and it'll have been like 8, 9, 10 years since the first time I read Elantris, it's like it would be nice to be like, okay, I really don't feel like popping up Elantris again, but having, like you said, an app or some sort of document that allows me to revisit it without having to go into like Reddit threads and find stuff from like 7 years ago that might be out of date or might have spoilers for other stuff. Having something that is official. I really wish we had this conversation before we interviewed him, because this would have been a great conversation to have with him.
Yeah, it was something that I had seen some people have a little bit of during Oathbringer, but I think Rhythm of War, with what ends up happening, really starts pushing it over the top for some people. And like it's always funny when people talk about this, because it goes into like epistemology. Like what you know what you don't know, and you don't know what you don't know. And so like the people who don't know what they are missing don't care that the Cosmere is this bigger thing. The people who know what the Cosmere is and know what's going on love it. And then there's the people who know that the Cosmere is a thing. They can see a reference, but then it's like, what? I just feel like I'm not getting. And like I can understand that as you're going through Rhythm of War, and more of this is happening, and it's unfolding more and more. It's just being like, man, I don't like. Yes, the plot is still functioning fine on its own, but like I just know there's all this stuff I'm missing, and I can see that being not an ideal reading experience.
Okay, we've kind of arrived at my sort of conclusion of this discussion, but I'm curious. I don't know what your thoughts were on all this. Did you have an overarching answer for this video on what the solution was or anything like that?
No, I mean, I definitely don't want the story to change, because I'm in the deep Cosmere camp.
Right.
Like I love all the cross. That's what attracted me to the Cosmere as a whole, was like, oh shit, it's Marvel in epic fantasy form. Sign me up. So I love that. I like his writing a lot. I don't want that to go away. But finding some way to help this potential third group could go a long way, because I think I understand where they're coming from. I see the position. I think the conversation going on in the community right now is a little rough. Like people are missing points that
they're just kind of talking past each other.
They're talking past each other, because someone who doesn't know what the Cosmere is will come in and be like, I think these people are crazy. I've never read anything else in the Cosmere, and I think this story works fine. And it's like, yeah, but you're actually in the group that should feel that way. You're not in the other group. And so I think by acknowledging that it's actually 3 groups, not 2, can go a long way. And that's why I was excited to talk about this, because I do think it is a bit more complicated than it initially appears.
Yeah. Very good. Well, I think that caps off our conversation. Mark, thank you so much for bringing this up. I think this is a fun video. I'm glad you pushed me to put it out. And thanks to everyone who's been subscribing to the channel, especially since the last Brandon Sanderson interview. I hope you enjoy this, and stay tuned for some broader fantasy content from myself and maybe Mark as well on this channel coming soon. Happy holidays, everyone.